Okay, hi, this is Mike Paul, and with me I have Aldo Solaris, and we're here to discuss a project that I want to do and that Aldo is helping me with, and that's Free the Hunter. And this is to do with ADHD, and hopefully going forward we will be able to shine a new light, some different perspectives on ADHD, and people's lives who are touched by it, whether you're a child who has it, an adult who's finding out that they've got it, or a parent or a loved one of someone with ADHD, that you will be able to find some nuggets of help in here, maybe a different view of understanding that can help improve the quality of you and others' lives around you. Brief intro for me, very, very brief initially, because I'm sure we'll get into more of it as we go along. I believe I'm ADHD, although I haven't got a diagnosis. I have been referred. This has come through an ongoing journey, and currently I'm homeless. I divorced a couple of years ago. I have no credible income at the moment after having a bust up in a business, and probably addicted to internet porn as well. Why has it taken so long? That will come out in the discussion to work out what might have been going on. But my interactions with children and my girlfriend's daughter, who's going through the diagnosis, gave me a very, very strong idea that ADHD or similar is something where I'm coming from. I met Aldo on a Life Accelerator course, which was a self-development course. So Aldo, I'll let you talk about yourself.
Yes, so my name is Aldo Solaris, and I am based in New York City. I've attended this Life Accelerator course just to really understand some of the obstacles that sometimes people have in terms of moving forward in life, instead in this case, going through transitions in life. And myself personally, I've been in the corporate world for about 20 plus years. And at a middle age, from an age perspective, I decided to make a major change and start my own business, go off my own, trying to figure out, what's the next step in my life. And that's why I joined the Life Accelerator program. And there I'm able to not only understand what are the hangups in terms of people going through their transitions in life, but also, how does it relate to me? I just wanted to make sure that I'm good from a life perspective in terms of what are the next steps for me. What's interesting for me personally is that on this Life Accelerator program, it's not just you're taking a course on your own. You're actually on this journey with a group of people. And from there, everyone has their own goals, objectives for taking the course. And this is how I met Mike Paul. I think it was great because out of all the people on the course, I think for some reason, Mike and I, we just became friends like right away. We just hit it off. A great conversation, got to meet him. He's a quality person. And when I got to understand, learn about his background, his story, I was intrigued because here's a good guy. And at the same time, with his ADHD, I don't know much about it. So it was an education for me. We went to the nth degree in terms of understanding everything about ADHD and people that have it. And it turns out you just have a tremendous amount of a wealth of information that I think not only did it benefit me, but I think it could benefit many other people that may or may not understand ADHD. So overall, I think it was a pleasure meeting you, and I'm looking forward to working with you on this project.
That's great. Thank you. Yes, I mean, our meeting is quite... for me, fortuitous. I've seen in the past I work in health and wellness. I have done for many years, and I'd seen companies that I followed and everything. And there was someone who was the driver in terms of the philosophy and the knowledge they had, but they always had someone working with them, someone who had that interest and everything, but actually could operate in the modern world successfully, which is something in terms of traditional success I'm struggling with. I've had good points and bad points with, and this idea that I might be ADHD would explain a lot of that. And interestingly, when I met you, Aldo, initially over the the teleconferences and stuff like that. It was
Mm-hmm.
you reminded me a lot of my dad in
Mm-hmm.
terms of you had a set philosophy, and I know we would often sort of joust a little bit over the whole you have to work hard to be successful type
Right.
thing and stuff like that. But that day we met in London, and we just seemed to hit it off totally, and
Right.
it was really lovely being able to speak to you and actually get behind the Aldo that I saw in the teleconferences.
Mm-hmm.
And that was really cool. And I am really, really grateful that I can have this opportunity for your offer to be able to accept that and to work with you, because I'm hoping we can do great things with it.
Yeah. No, I agree.
So cool. All right. Well, I don't know how you want to take this, Aldo. Should we?
Yeah, I just think we had a great conversation when we met in London, and I think overall we got on this life accelerator journey. And one of the things that I want to be able to ask you is just what are some of your takeaways? What are some of the things that we went on this journey, we completed the course, and then like what are some of the things that you took away from the program that actually made you think about who you are, what you want to do, what you're going to do in the future?
Okay, so yeah, the course for me was a great one. In fact, it was going on. It was maybe a symptom of my ADHD, in terms of it was my last few pennies, and it was, I don't know, grasping for straws really at some stage. But having worked in health and wellness, what I saw on the Life Accelerator course is that everything they covered was what I've been trying to get across myself in my personal training. So not only looking at the obvious things for health and fitness, which is, the exercise that you do and the food that you eat are typically what most people focus on, but also then how we look after our minds in terms of, do we meditate, do we practice compassion and gratitude, how do we get on with our families? I thought that was really key, and that was one of the biggest modules for me. And then this idea of how do we have a focus in life? What I actually found with the course, it was, whilst I loved everything on it, for me personally, the only reason I managed to get through it was because I wasn't working at the time. The mental energy it took to be able to take up. I loved the accountability. I loved that we worked with people. I thought that was fantastic. But it was a real struggle to actually keep up. And I had this roller coaster throughout the 6 weeks, inspired, the highs inspired by you guys, by Julian, my team leader, when we got to talk to Brian and stuff, up and down though. And when I looked at the end of the 6 weeks at for those who don't know, we had this big spreadsheet on Google Docs, and there was a whole list of tasks, several tasks for each week, many of it based around shooting videos around your experiences, doing stuff for each particular topic area. And when you'd done it, you got to turn it green, and if it wasn't done, it stayed red. Well, by the end of the 6 weeks, there was a fairly familiar pattern, which was that there was, I don't know, maybe 20% of the people that have completed everything, or pretty much everything. They've done 90% plus of the tasks. There was a large percentage in the middle who'd maybe done 50 to 80% of the tasks. And there was a small percentage at the bottom who'd done even less or even dropped out. And I've seen this pattern before in health and fitness studies over and over. And in fact, Dr. Eric Cobb of Z Health talks about this. Now, for me, and this was something that came across in the task from the course, and this is one of my takeaways, is that there's an implication there that when you set a task and you don't do it, it's down to the individual. Now, yes, we all have responsibility for our actions, and I'm not going to try and deny that. But the assumption behind it is that the task was set perfectly, the environment is perfect, everything else is great, and it's just totally down to that individual. So if the task doesn't get done, it is the fault of the individual for whatever reason. Now, through my work in coaching, and I believe this has come through in OT and stuff, we've realized occupational therapy, we've realized that there's a subject called ecological dynamics. And it's basically that you cannot study the individual in isolation of its environment, because how the individual behaves is interdependent on the environment, the people he or she is with, the sleep they're getting, the food they're taking, the movement they're doing, the types of people and the types of behavior being directed at them, and the type of pressure they're under, all sorts of things, so many variables. In these studies that Eric Cobb talked about, the assumption was that people who didn't do well on a weight training program or an exercise program were non-responders, genetic non-responders. To me, that was like, well, the underlying assumption there is that everybody should react the same way to this exercise program.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm going to give you an extreme example here, but there's a continuum here. You're giving someone squats and deadlifts, and they've got a massive hamstring pull or a quad pull, or even worse, a broken leg.
Mm-hmm.
So people can't do the same program.
Right.
The people with a muscle pull cannot do that program to the same extent. And in fact, it may be more damaging for them at that state to do that. If you extrapolate that across to what we were doing on the Life Accelerator, everyone had exactly the same amount to do, but everyone was different, had different life experiences. I wasn't working. Alex Clemens, to me, the guy's destined to shoot to the stars. He's
right.
just completed a year of doing a vlog every day. I can't get past 5 days of doing something every day other than brushing my teeth. Maybe wiping my arse too. He stormed through it whilst working 40 to 50 hours a week, yet there were others who really struggled, and a lot in between.
Right.
So my takeaway from that was that, this is a great course, but wouldn't it be better if we could understand why some people weren't succeeding on it and be able to cater for them more individually?
Right.
And it was through that, and then the interaction with my girlfriend's daughter and her ADHD and my previous coaching experience, that all of this ADHD started coming to light, and I understood my own difficulties with doing it.
I think one of the things that I took away from the program, and just for everyone's benefit, some of the overall themes that you get you're taught on the program is about mindset, setting goals, getting things done. You'll understand themes like extreme ownership, owning your life, owning your decisions, understanding gratitude, meditation in terms of body. You learn about physical fitness and trying different things, and you learn about relationships. And so it's a whole gamut of things that are out there that are potentially, kind of like game stoppers from a life perspective, right? If you don't have or address a lot of these issues in life, it's going to be hard for us to progress in life or even transition through changes in life and things like that. So, for me, as a kind of like, I guess I would, say I'm a type A type personality, and, I'm all about success and moving on up and making that money, chasing the dream, right? Like, like 95% of people out there. Actually less, but we'll talk more about that later. The main thing is it's a program, it's tasks, it's an accountability document. It's all about just checking the boxes, getting it done. Not a problem for me. And then meanwhile, I'm looking at it like, well, how come everyone's not doing the same thing? Is it that they're not motivated? Is it that they're just too busy? So here we are, like trying to, at least from my perspective, trying to rationalize why is it that people aren't getting things done. Is there, like, what's the problem, right? That the main thing is like, well, there's winners and losers in life, and that's just the way it's going to be, but it's not that easy. I think from then there's the other benefits that I got from this, in the sense that, well, here's another gentleman that's just explained to me, he's like, wait a minute, but this approach doesn't work for everyone. And for me, it's like, well, it has to work for everyone. It's telling you what to do from A to B to C. It's just telling you step by step. There should be no issues at all, right? But meanwhile, you're telling me, it's like, wait a minute, but it's just a different approach. If someone has, in this case, ADHD, there's going to be a challenge, right? And then as for me personally, I have a young one at home. He's about to be 5. And I'm thinking, okay, sometimes it's easy to motivate them. You just tell them what to do, they do it. Sometimes other kids, They give you this huge resistance,
Yeah.
right? And then meanwhile, that's just kind of like relatively, quote unquote, normal kids. But what about a kid that has ADHD, or a parent that may not be aware, or a teacher that may not be aware that a child has ADHD? Then what? That kid is going to have issues as they get accepted into different school programs, and as they progress into their academic career, they're going to have major challenges. And what's the alternative? What's the actual most of what is the solution most of the time? A drug. And I'm thinking, wow, I need to learn more about this in general, just one is just to be a better human being, just to be educated about it. But also, if I was to run into other kids or other parents that the kids are struggling through this, I think maybe Mike Paul has all this information. It would be great to get all this information on paper somehow, and be able to understand the problem more and more. So then I realized, well, this program also applies to people in the corporate world, in the work. Some people aren't motivated. Maybe there's some things that you need to talk to them in a different way, or maybe do things in a certain way, so like that they can actually complete it. And so it's just tremendous. And so for me, it's kind of like you just open up a black box. It's like, now I want to understand exactly, get a better grasp on it. Maybe if I work with Mike Paul and just do these, interviews, and just, start at least laying out the foundation to understand the problem more. And then we take it topic by topic. I think this would be great to document it, and then other people can actually benefit from it. So overall, that's my main motivation here, and that's my biggest takeaway out of everything else, aside from understanding my, my own, strengths, weaknesses, and so on. But it's this, what actually drives people, what motivates people. And this is, I think, the secret sauce. There's a lot more to it than just telling people what to do and then they do it.
Yeah, that's yeah, I couldn't agree with you more, Aldo. And it's lovely to hear that even with your A-type personality, that you were able to look beyond that and see potentially much wider implications for this.
Right.
And the fact that not only will the kids with ADHD have issues, the parents will have issues, the teachers will have issues if we carry on going with the assumptions that we currently work with. Now, I'm not saying I have all the answers at this stage, and it's early on in my journey. So part of this series and part of this book will be charting my journey. You know me, I read everything that I can and listen to what I can almost obsessively, and that's part of why I never actually do anything, because I'm too taken on board stuff. And already I would argue I have quite a lot of knowledge about this stuff. For those of you who are having extreme issues with this, I'm not going to be able to give you a cure-all now, but I know already that it's not just a case of what we tell or do with the child, it's how we behave ourselves that will make a big difference, how our values and belief systems are shaped, and really understanding what is important for both ourselves and for our children. What do we really want for them? Because I think for a lot of children that will be the crux in certainly the middle class sphere of our society. The middle class parents are typically the ones who are driving to reach the higher echelons of society. They're very success driven, achievement driven, and for someone with ADHD tendencies, this can be their kryptonite, being put in that situation, I believe. When we look at the darker sides of society, we look at the criminal fraternity. In ADHD as a general in the UK is reported to run at about 5% of the population. We'll talk a little bit more about the diagnosis of that at some stage. Within the prison population, it's reported to run at anything from 15 to 25%. So, the old-fashioned assumption would be that ADHD people are just bad people, so they're just more likely to become criminal. Or maybe it's more about the way their brain operates, the environment that they are best suited to. you know, compared to the environment they're actually in. And I think one or two stories I've mentioned in the first draft chapter of my book, which we're going to make available as each chapter as we go along, will show the potential for someone to go a certain route. The other population I want to mention at this stage, showing the darker side of things, is that for addicts, drug addicts, alcohol addicts, etc., again, versus 5% of the population as a general, again, 15, 20, 25% plus of addicts are known to have ADHD. So again, we see a much higher proportion. The positive side of that, though, is also when we look at artists, musicians, writers, entrepreneurs, they again have a much higher proportion of people with ADHD. So there are definite positives to this. And for me, my journey with Aldo alongside is looking at how can we create the best opportunities and the best lives for all of those concerned along the way. From my point of view, philosophically speaking, with as little need for medication as possible. Now, I understand that there are circumstances which will necessitate the use of medication, but I see it as a last resort rather than a first resort. And I think too often we're seeing it as a first resort. And that's due to time, finances, and outdated thinking about what ADHD is. So,
yeah, I think one of the things that I took away as well, and I think in our conversations we discussed this, and I always kept saying, hey, Mike Paul, why don't you just put all this stuff on paper? You know, get all this stuff on paper. We need to get everything that's in your head and just put it on there and share it with the world. And I think that's why I'm really curious as, you know, maybe what can we do to get it done, right? So I think that's why we teamed up. You know, this is for everyone's benefit, why we teamed up. So I'm going to use my my skills in terms of like, you know, kind of like from an executive perspective. This is what we would do in a corporate world. We would have an outline of what we're going to do step by step. We have a vision of where we want to go. And then from there, I put that together. Then Mike Paul, from there, he sees that. We adjust, you know, whatever we have to do in terms of timelines and topics. And then from there, we just work together in getting things done. And, you know, it's great to know as well that that outline actually helped, because I think what's awesome is that just today alone, you just came back to us saying, or came back to us as a team with a chapter 1 of your book, right? Chapter 1. And I think, I don't know whether you would have done that anyway, but maybe because you see that the project is taking place, all of a sudden now it gave you the drive to actually do that chapter 1. And for me, that's a major win. I put that as a milestone. This is what we do in the corporate world. We set up milestones, and I think that's actually a big deliverable that you did. And that actually makes me motivate to actually even participate more in the project. Yeah. So I'm just giving you that feedback as well, that whatever you do that is an accomplishment is something that it generates energy, and then is going to give energy to the project, and that's what's going to push it towards completion.
I'm smiling lots there because I'm remembering the scenario that led to me messaging you almost in desperation from my point. I'd been at home with my mum and dad for a week, and we'd been discussing where I was with my life at the age of 50, close to being 51, as I mentioned, homeless, bankrupt, no money, blah, 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 and my dad not shouting at me, but quite forcefully saying, well, son, have you decided now what you're going to do with your life? Is this it? Is this the direction you found? And my dad was very old-fashioned, and he was brought up with thinking, well, once you've chosen a path, you're going to stick to that path. And whenever you stray, you've got to bring that dedication, that hard work. Maybe there's a bit of a stick there. Maybe there's a bit of a carrot there to get you back onto the path. But you stick with your path. It just never, ever worked for me. But for 3 decades out of university, and probably the decade before in education, a big part of me was trying to follow this path. And I was sat there with Dad, and we had a long discussion. I won't go into the ins and outs of it now, but there is a bit about it in the first chapter. So some excerpts from what I remember about that conversation. But I decided whilst I was down there, well, I can't cope with being in the house with Mum and Dad all day, so I'm going to have a little wander down into Maidstone town and found a nice coffee shop in Waterstones. And to me, ever since I've had cancer, I'd started since 2009 reevaluating life in the modern world and what it's about and stuff like that. And I was struggling with why are we here? What are we doing? And my mum tells me I used to ask her those questions as a child. But anyway, I went on this walk and I got into Waterstones, had a nice big window. I sat down, I had my books, and I thought, well, I'm going to start documenting this ADHD thing and stuff. And this was before I talked to you about it. And before I knew it, I had 10 pages of notes. And awesome. I'd gone from let's document my experience to Christ, 15-20% in prisons, addicts, this, that, and we need to do something with the education system. We need to totally reevaluate the way society runs. And I'd literally gone from something that was doable and controllable in half an hour to something that was like this worldwide mission.
Right.
It was like, oh! And I was just like, I don't know what to do. I don't know where to start. And I remembered our conversation in London, and you'd said when we'd gone over so many areas of fitness and wellness and stuff like that. And he says, Mike, we've got to get this information out there. I'll help you. We'll do a podcast a week. We'll write down everything you know. We'll put out. And I was like, I wonder if Aldo still wants to do that. So what I did, guys, is I messaged Aldo and I said, Aldo, are you still willing to help me with this stuff? And he came back straight away. Yeah, I'm there for you, man. I'm there for you. And so I photographed these notes and just emailed them to Aldo. And within a couple of hours, he comes back with a structure, just as he said. And I just looked at it and thought, fuck yeah. That makes life so much simpler.
Teamwork, man. Teamwork.
So it is cool. So this, for me, the first takeaway for anyone with ADHD, if you suspect you have it or you already have it and you're struggling with your life, don't believe you have to do it on your own. Yeah, because it is hard to do it on your own. I've been self-employed, or had been self-employed for a couple of years. I've given that up now to try and stabilize myself. Get myself a small part-time job, but then to work on this in the background and then to look at building a business down the line again. But one of the reasons I couldn't do it was I don't want to call it a disorder, but I had a way of operating which didn't function well with how I thought I needed to do things. And I was trying to do it all on my own. But the thing is, I'm not good at everything. I'm good at certain things. And if you look in the corporate world, Aldo, you'll be able to confirm this, is you can't have the same type of personality doing every job.
That's right.
Your R&D person is going to be different to your accountant. It's going to be different to your lawyer. It's going to be different to your CEO. All of this. So you need different personalities, different skill sets. So if you are ADHD, there's a good chance that you can operate well working on your own. But it would be good to have someone who can give you that structure, that support, that accountability. And trust me, this is working so well for me already in terms of I've achieved more in the last few weeks with the help of Aldo, and also a little scheme I set up with Michael. We did our first working session today. We just agreed to work at the same time. And me, bizarrely, that was just having someone else saying that they were working at the same time meant I sat down and worked too. And it was great. So here we are. Chapter 1 is there. And yes, and I'm so glad that helps you on. And I understand that because people have offered to help me in the past with stuff, with the cancer stuff. But I never came through with the stuff. And then slowly but surely, they just drifted away. No, I'm not asked again. I'll not ask again. You know, I didn't.
Yeah, no, I mean, the way I looked at it, when you deliver that chapter, I'm like, oh, this is great, because my expectation from a work perspective, I'm saying, okay, I'll drive, right? I'll drive. I don't mind doing, let's just say, 60% of the work, and I'll ask the questions, he'll fill in the blanks, and then we'll just move forward in time. But once you deliver that chapter, it's like, wow, that means he wants this. He wants this. And that makes me want it more. So I think, so that's great. So that foundation is already laid out. So that's awesome. I think one thing to, for the benefit of the audience is that we're going to load this video on YouTube, right?
Yes.
And any other social media that's out there that's loadable. And if you have any questions that you say, well, because this is a relatively a long-term project. I would say about a year project. And we're going to, shoot for doing this on a weekly basis. But maybe if there's an issue that you want to address, a concern that you want to address, a question, we can actually look at those questions. If you submit them in the comments, we'll look at those questions. We'll prioritize those questions. And maybe if there's something that's relatively urgent, we'll address it in the next video, or even potentially even come back to you directly. So just keep that in mind. That's a seed that I want to plant out there. And I think this is a good service model as we move forward in time. So to keep in mind that we are in the process of writing the book. This whole journey is about writing a book as well. The ideas and the concepts are out there. We just need to get it on paper. We have an outline, but we are not afraid to, pivot, in a positive way to, help anyone that needs the help right now. So I wanted to put that out there.
Yeah, definitely, Aldo, exactly. And interesting, one of the discussions I had with my dad, and I was trying to get him to do the role that you're doing, but he's retired now, and he's like IT and everything, not so clever. So whilst he was sort of halfway engaged with it, I think we came to the conclusion that wasn't going to work too well. But he's quite old-fashioned, and I have a level of it. He's 70-odd, I'm 50-odd. There are 20-year-olds out there who have totally different concept than I. But he wanted me to write a book as well. And when I wanted to write a book about cancer, it was like, oh Christ, it's too daunting. It's too daunting. And already what Aldo's done with just that brief outline, which when I think back to the way I did my university essays and stuff, that's essentially what I would end up doing, is to break it down into small chunks. But then I was trying to explain to Dad, as like, well, the thing is, if I write a book, and it takes me a year to write a book, that's a year without this information getting out there. And given my past history, there's very little guarantee that book's going to get out there. Right. So I love that we're doing this podcast. This gives me a reason to get some writing done on a regular basis. Also, for those of you who get to follow along with the videos, you basically get the draft copy of the book as it's being written, because we will be putting up that draft chapter that's been written, and hopefully we'll be talking about some of the topic areas in that to be able to give a different perspective and a spoken perspective, because many people live by different ways. You can take things in the written word, the spoken word, by actually experiencing stuff. And as Aldo said, if you have any questions, one of the things I found for myself and my experience of self-help books in the past, and again, lots of projects I've wanted to do working in health and wellness, is actually it's that ongoing support that makes the difference. So the number of people, myself included, who've started a self-help book, thought it was fantastic, got totally fired up, but then for 3 days we didn't read it because the kids were ill, or we had too much work to do, or we got ill, and then you just lose it and you drift onto something else. Maybe there was no one else to talk about it to, and you're really fired up to, and you want to talk, but none of your mates care. They just want to go for a drink down the pub, or they're out playing golf and stuff, or they're just too sorted to even think about reading a self-help book. So for me, alongside this, and if you guys want that and we can trial this, is to actually have, like we had on the Life Accelerator, is start to build a support group. Initially, right. My thoughts might be just initially something like a Facebook group that people can join and post questions and experiences, and then take it from there, see how we go. And what I want to be able to do is signpost links to resources, different perspectives, different people, their ideas, experiences. And what I'd love to do as well, and if we can get this, is start interviewing some people who both struggled with ADHD and similar stuff, but also people who have succeeded in the traditional sense of the word.
That's a great idea.
And so that we can show all the different aspects of life, and that it's not that one, it's not a lodestone, an anchor that's going to tie you down to mediocrity. And in fact, some of the most talented, gifted people on this world, on this planet, probably had ADHD or are indeed confirmed ADHD people, and that we can still succeed. But rather than trying to fit within the current environment, what they've done is shape their own environment, and that's how I see some of the things we can help with. So yeah, I think that's great, and hopefully, if you know somebody who is affected by this or may be interested, please flag it up, and post them links and stuff like that. And as Aldo says, any questions.
Yeah, I think wanted to also provide kind of like an overview of the topics that we're going to cover as we move forward. So of course, we're going to get to know Mike Paul a little bit more, understand his life situation, and understand also you were also you had cancer and how that impacted your life. So we're going to learn a little bit more about Mike Paul. The other thing we're going to learn about is much more, what is ADHD? Things like, is it a disorder? Can you detect it early? Are there different forms of ADHD? How prevalent is it in society? So I think we got some color on that. And then if you do have it, well, what are the risks, right? What are the risks from a personal perspective, from a family perspective? How does that impact your friends, your relationships? How does that impact your career? What is the impact of technology today on people with ADHD? It's just tremendous amount of topics out there. We can go on and on and on. And then, sometimes the answers to these questions and these topics changes because as, let's just say, the age range is between 5 and 10, maybe or between as teenagers or as young men and women, or as we get older, how do we actually approach ADHD or someone that has it, and how do they actually manage their lives as they move forward? So, and that's only if you understand, if you already acknowledge that you have it. What happens if you don't have it and you're trying to manage your life that way as well? So a lot of other things that are out there that we need to discuss. And this is just a brief overview. And like I said, it's just much more. I think this is a book that's going to be developed over time, and it's going to be developed by the input from the people that are participate in the project as well. So it's kind of like writing a book in real time, and it's going to be impacted by the people that are participating in these interviews and in this project as well. So other than that, I think this is a good way to plant that seed for everyone. If you have any interest or any questions or concerns, right now is the time to raise them. And between Mike Paul and myself, we'll come back to you and say, okay, this is what we're going to do. We're going to talk about this certain item and address this issue next week or the following week, and we can put something like that as we move forward. So I think I'm excited overall about this project, and it's going to be incredible accomplishment.
Cool. So something just occurred to me there whilst you were saying that, when you said about what is ADHD, and I think there's been an assumption between us that everybody knows what the hell it is and an idea about what we're talking about. So I think we've got about 15 minutes left.
Sure.
So I thought maybe if I give an understanding of what I believe ADHD, how I believe it's perceived at the moment, and maybe you can chip in with your thoughts on what you understood about it. ADHD stands for Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder. It's combined with Attention Deficit Disorder. So it used to be known as ADD, and then there was a hyperactive, and if you go back even further, there were different names for it. Now the attention deficit and the hyperactivity have been combined into one acronym, ADHD. But it is still often paired with the ADD. It's a behavioral analysis. So I think I'd like to go through this in another podcast in more detail, the actual criteria for how they diagnose this. But essentially, it's a set of criteria linked to attention and attention-based behavior, and also activity-based behavior or hyperactivity based behavior, that looks at do your traits lead to difficulties in social, academic, and work-based environments? And has this been going on for 6 months or more? So, for instance, a really easy one to understand, most people, especially when it comes to children, understand the hyperactivity side of things. Children that just can't sit still and will not sit still when you tell them to. So the wording is along the lines of excessive movement or movement that is not appropriate to the situation at hand, children who cannot sit still when told to. So that what happens, I think, is with both sets of criteria, if you have so many of the criteria, you can tick these off, and this is done through observation of children, interviews with parents, teachers, family, etc. With adults, again, similar, maybe observation, not quite so much, but interviews with family members, maybe looking back at past school reports, etc. And then you will finally get a diagnosis. There is currently no biological or physiological test that has been shown to be conclusive of ADHD. So it is a set of criteria. You ran when I told you not to, you have ADHD. Now that's an oversimplification, but that's where we're at. And to give you an example of the fact that some of the difficulties I see with this, it's user defined. It's not actually user defined, it's controller defined, and the users are the ones that suffer. So there's a saying that the history books are written by the victors, and so what the implication there is that the history we get is from the perspective of those who won the various battles, wars, etc. So typically an idea might be, if you're in the US and you're in Britain, when you see war stories about the Second World War, you see it very much from an American and a UK perspective. You do not see a German perspective on that at all. Okay. With this definition of a behavioural disorder, again, it's defined by the society we're in at the moment. And to give you an example of that, I can't remember the exact numbers, but for adult ADHD, they have changed the number of criteria you need to meet to be diagnosed as ADHD. So in one fell swoop, from one edition of the Diagnostic Manual for Mental Health Disorders, they've said you needed 6 of these criteria to be ADHD. In the next edition, now you only need 5. Now, for me, that's a good and a bad thing, because I actually think we're all on a continuum, and I don't think that, there's not a cut-off line, and it's almost like an art to define whether this is a problem for you or not. But it just goes to show the problems. It's that diagnostically we turn around, well, actually, now we consider you only need 5 of these criteria for the last 6 months to be considered as ADHD. So it's essentially, it's behavioural. What are its causes? So traditionally it was thought of as just bad behaviour. And we alluded to this at the beginning. If you don't do something, it's down to the individual. Right. What we now have seen through modern neuroscience and genetics and stuff, we have a gene that's been, at least one gene that's been identified that correlates well with ADHD and other similar mental health stuff, and that is the DRD4 gene, and specifically the 7R allele of that. Now, I don't know what that word is or how to spell it yet, so I need to look that up. But there is a specific gene that has been mentioned and found that correlates highly with these traits. What we see with people with these genes, and we see with brain scans, MRI functions, etc., we see lower in certain situations, lower levels of certain neurotransmitters. And these are basically little chemicals flying around our body that perform a messaging function at a very basic level of understanding. And one of the key ones, there are more, but one of the key ones is dopamine. And many people will have heard of dopamine. This is a short-term feel-good hormone or neurotransmitter, which is associated with short-term behavior. It's what we believe from an evolutionary perspective gave us the drive to carry on doing stuff that was beneficial for us. So if you were hunting food, you might see what looked like an orchard in the distance. You think, oh, great, that will give you the motivation to carry on your trek in the expectation of finding a reward at the end of it. Now, what we have to remember is that this system has been designed over tens, if not hundreds of thousands of years. And in the time where this system evolved, there were not the types of rewards that are available to us today.
Right.
So now we see alcohol, drugs, mobile phone notifications, porn, internet porn, porn magazines. We've started seeing, we can see these spikes in dopamine.
Sugar, right?
Sugar is another one. So
That's,
yeah,
I mean,
food.
So even if you have ADHD, right, and let's just say you have it, and then like there's the impact of that on your body, on yourself, on your mind, and then on top of that, sometimes it's masked, you know, by this other attributes that are out there, these other risk attributes that we either, you know, we consume it, you're hooked on computers, we watch movies, we you know, consume alcohol, smoke cigarettes. All these things are either masking it or enhancing it, or it's just, we don't, you know, to even really even understand whether you even have it, you have to eliminate all these other factors, which is already hard to do. I mean, we talk about sugar, but imagine, you know, now we're in, you know, our bodies are like toxic from all these things that we're eating, absorbing, our minds are absorbing as well. And then now we have to deal with the issue, but where that issue is so hidden that how are we actually going to even begin to solve it? Yeah.
So all those things you mentioned, if you lump them all under the word stress, different types of stressor, you're totally right there, because they can massively impact the way any person works on a day-to-day basis. So the issue for the ADHD person is they typically have lower motivation for the drudgery, the what doesn't interest them.
Right.
But typically they seem to have higher motivation in short bursts for that which does interest them. Now, a really good example with a child is a child in school versus a child on their Sony PlayStation or their Xbox or whatever. You try dragging them off that Xbox, they're loving it. And you cannot tell me that that child is not very strongly focused on what they're doing.
Right.
They've probably playing a game which they had to learn, you know, and the rules. I struggle with learning the computer games these days, so you cannot tell me that these children do not learn either. Is what they're doing helpful for them in the longer term? Possibly not. And we know with computer games and stuff like that, that's a, you know, it's a big subject out there. But typically what we see is this lower motivation to do the drudgery, but sometimes there are periods of very, very high motivation. This is, so rather than attention deficit, I heard a really nice description, and I'll post the link for this as well on the site. This guy who has ADHD discovered it in his adulthood. He writes a blog along with another guy. He calls himself, he's described himself as having an attention dysregulation, an attention regulation. Oh, I can't even remember it now. Oh, this was it. Attention focused dysregulation. So it's to say that it's not that he can't focus, he can focus really, really strongly, typically on things that interest him. But one of the key things he mentions is that he cannot do it at the flick of a switch. And this is something that is very true to me, is if something interests me, wow, you've got me. But if it doesn't, you've lost me. You've lost me very quickly. And that's when the daydreaming coming over, the glazing over, all of that. So that's one aspect. That's one key aspect that you might see more in adults than in children. or it might get noticed more. The hyperactivity is the kid constantly fidgeting. Do they need to move? Are they touching people? Are they invading people's space? Are they just cannot keep them still? For instance, my girlfriend's daughter, she gets to this stage at night. She just needs to start jumping around in the living room and doing cartwheels and jumping on the sofa. And we have this little thing we go through, belly bumping. She loves bouncing off my belly, which is quite sizable at the moment. It's like, and her mum gets really worried because it's waking her up at night and stuff like that. But actually, to me, it's energy she needs to get rid of.
Right.
Right. So that, very, very broadly speaking, is it. Another thing that may come across to me is the defiance. No, I'm not doing that.
Mm-hmm.
And Aldo says, but that's your homework, son, and you need to do your homework. You need to get good grades, to get good qualification, to get a good job, to have a good life. If the child could articulate a sensible response to that, it would. But it doesn't. It can't. So it screams and shouts and says, I'm not doing that. And this is where the problem I can see for parents comes.
Right.
I believe I can start articulating some of the issues with that. And also, just as for me, I need to start wrapping up soon, looking at the time, is that we call this a disorder, but I'm just going to chuck it out there from my ADHD perspective. A child that moves too much, along with a lot of other things, I'm simplifying it, but if we take the moves when it's been told not to, is given a disorder. Okay. What about the child who sits down for 8 hours a day, does as it's told, gets its good qualifications, goes to university, sits down at university, gets the good job, drives to work, sits down at work for 8 hours a day, comes home, which is a couple of hours a day, sitting down because that's what you do, and 40 years later is having a heart attack, is overweight, has high cholesterol levels, has got arthritis in the joints because he's not moving. To me, and I'm maybe going to be a little bit controversial here, I've ignored the bleeding obvious about my body, and I overly conform to life disorder. It's obvious that we're meant to move, and we are having an obesity problem, and yet at every step we're telling children, no, you've got to sit in a chair, don't run in the corridor, don't run in the playgrounds. We're cutting down their ability to play for various reasons, and there are much wider societal reasons now. But, I look at normal folk, so-called normal folk. I'm normal. We're all on a spectrum here. But I look at the folk who conform to life and then end up with depression, illness, physical disability. They get to old age and they fall over and they can't stand up again. That to me could also, if I was writing the mental diagnostic book, be called a disorder.
That would be a disorder, yeah.
So I don't want to call any of this a disorder because it's not, and it's not very helpful to be labelled as such. And I think just to touch briefly, that's where the hunter theory comes in. That we've seen that there is a gene there, and that actually at some stage in our lives, if there's a gene there was an evolutionary advantage. Evolution doesn't chuck in genes for the sake of it. There was an evolutionary advantage to this. I've done a little vlog on this prior. I read a little story, but again, I think that will be a topic for another podcast to go into that and start exploring a more positive way of looking at this. So for me, that's about all I have to say for today, Aldo.
No, I think I want to finish up by, in a sense. So first of all, overall, this is great because this wasn't planned. We just went with it, and it's perfect. So I love it. The other thing is just for anyone that's watching, at least for now, listening, where exactly are you going to load these videos? I think, if you can provide some color on that. And then from there, so if you could just provide
Yeah,
some color on
cool.
that.
So I have a YouTube channel at the moment, Mike Paul Real, and I also have a Facebook page, Mike Paul Real. So that's where the stuff will be posted first off, and I'll put the links to that in the notes. I have started set up a website called Free the Hunter. freethehunter.org, so keep your eyes open for that. We'll let you know when it's up and running, hopefully get a bit more information on it first, so there's something for you guys to look at. But all of this stuff will be going on there, and that's what I hope to be longer term. The big resource, the interactive resource, the book will come along from that and be written along the way. But I think the key thing, as Aldo has said, is the interaction with you guys, because at the end of the day, this is me documenting my journey, but also what drives me here is that I see hopefully we can improve the outlook for a lot of people out there, and it will be that drives us on. As Aldo says, seeing the stuff coming out from me is driving on his urge to help me. Seeing the feedback from you guys, the questions, any which way we can help. If you disagree with us as well, that's cool. Let us know, and let us know why. But experiences from anyone out there as well. All of this, if we can build a wider community, my belief is that whatever the issues that we face, is that if we can help everyone understand more what's going on, then we all immediately will start behaving differently, because with understanding, you can't choose to act the same way. So that is my major goal initially, is understanding, but hopefully to build a community, if that works out of it, where we can all support each other.
That's awesome, man. I couldn't agree with you more, and I'm looking forward to our next interaction there, our next conversation. So awesome, man.
Cool.
Another milestone, man. Another milestone.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you, Aldo. I'm feeling pretty pumped myself. That's
good.
really good. So I'm going to say goodbye from me, Mike Paul, and Aldo. You want to say goodbye?
Goodbye, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, and looking forward to getting more information from you guys, and looking forward to talking to you next week, Mike Paul. So
yeah.
see you then.
Keep your eyes out for Free the Hunter. All right.
All right.
Okay, guys.